Hello, good morning.
So how are you doing today?
Good. I'm in Minneapolis for about 2 weeks.
What are you doing in Minneapolis?
So my roommate, his brother lives here,
Oh,
so they just kind of figured it was a good chance to get out of Austin. And in theory, it was going to be cooler, but it turns out it's in the 90s here today, and Austin's rain. So I mean, I guess it actually is better than rain, but
it's 75 degrees right now here in Austin. Yeah, there is a heat wave building up across the northern United States, and there's this low that's gotten trapped that's just keeping us cool and wet, but it's channeling a lot of heat up through the Midwest. It's very bizarre.
yep. How you doing?
Oh, it, Cyrus will tell you all about it, but I did some lobbying at the end of the session, and they're crazy. They're nuts.
Yeah, it's one of those things like oh, she didn't have the Zoom link. Let me edit this.
Yeah, we were lobbying for the winter storm Uri. I think it was Senate Bill 17 or something like that.
Hmm.
To and we had a limited amount of success. We prevented a really bad amendment from going through, and we had a very limited amount of success with that. But this Republican gets up there and talks about how Texas has had such a wonderful grid. We have, we ever it's a free enterprise, it's a free market, the prices are low, the demands of, the way the market works kept it low, work wonderful. And then all this damn cheap solar and wind energy got on and ruined everything.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
It's
Even though most of it was like, gas lines freezing up.
Well, yeah, but that's free market. When you get something cheaper and it sells,
Oh, that too.
that's that's the definition of free market. This guy, oh God, it's his bias is so clear. Well, it's only good if it's fossil fuel. It's only free market if it's fossil fuel. Anything else is communist or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
We were just sitting there like, you have to think about it a second. It's not real obvious immediately, but then it hits everybody. Everybody's going, "Oh my God, this guy is so." But it's just this bias. They're blinded, or they act like they're blinded. Who knows?
Yeah, it's so much it's like culture war bullshit.
Yeah,
It's not about facts, it's about, and I mean, it's not like the left is immune to that either, but the right's just been crazy.
and they're always trying to gin up outrage.
Yeah.
You know, it's not outrageous that you're trying to take people's rights away. Then they have to gin up outrage about some kind of silly culture war stuff like what someone's doing behind closed doors or
Yeah.
what's underneath their pants. It's like, what? Why do you care?
Yeah, it's like we have, the giant influx of like transgendered people like competing in events.
Oh, it's that whole thing is just so. And one of the days we were there, they had a huge turnout, with transgendered and plus allies. I mean, it was
Uh-huh.
huge. It was huge. It was very good. It was great seeing that, but I don't know if it matters to these Republicans. I don't think
You
they just
know,
come there and
yeah, that's the frustrating thing about a lot of stuff at like the ledge is like it's not like Austin where like helps to get people out. It's like having go to Austin people testify can hurt your cause as likely as help it.
yeah. Uh, I don't know. These people, they're they figure they're going to win no matter what, and I think this is where redistricting really is terrible. And they don't have to appeal to anyone. you know, they just go in there and they bully people around and do their thing and go home. I don't know. It's just we did,
I think that the future of mobile vaccinations could probably be flu shots as well. That could be the future of mobile vaccinations. So I hope that we continue the mobile vaccination stuff or the curbside vaccinations, because certainly COVID's never going to go away, right? So maybe this is the new norm.
All right, so it's 12:10, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. And we got live on Facebook and we'll post the recording. But we have Cyrus Reed here to talk about the recent legislative session. I also have Paige Ellis. She had a few things she wanted to talk about at the end of the meeting about from Austin City Council initiatives. So she'll have a few minutes around 12:50 or so. But for now, Cyrus is here. He said he didn't have a PowerPoint, but I'm sure we'll have plenty of questions. He has plenty to talk about. I know it's been an adventurous legislative session. Depressing in many ways, but it's always great that we have good people like Cyrus fighting the good fight at doing what we can to stop bad things and insert good things where possible. So with that, I'm going to give it to Cyrus Reed with the Sierra Club and take it away.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Cyrus Reed with the Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club. I've had two roles for a while, conservation director and interim director. I don't want to be director. We're actively looking for a new director. So go on the main Sierra Club website if you want to apply for the chapter director position. I also serve as the main lobbyist during the legislative session, which I think all of you know just ended a few short days ago. And it was a stunningly interesting and head-scratching legislative session that we just got through. And I think the big news that all of you probably know is that Sunday night, which was, the legislative session ended Monday, but Sunday night was kind of the last gasp to pass any bills. And the majority, not all, but the majority of the Texas Democrats in the House physically left the House, many of them going to a Baptist church in East Austin, in order to prevent passage of what was, I'll call it the worst environmental bill of the session, because it involved voting rights, and that was SB 7. And SB 7 was bad in the Senate version, it was bad in the House version, but it became even worse in what's called the conference committee, and that's what incensed a lot of activists, a lot of people around the state of Texas, but especially the Democrats who'd been fighting it from the beginning. So they did walk out, thus killing SB 7, also killing some other bills, one of which is very important to Austin, which was an anti-local control bill called SB 14, which involves the ability of cities, so city council folks that have passed ordinances to protect workers, either for water breaks or from being subject to discrimination for their sexual orientation or gender or race, those kind of issues. That was also killed in the process because the Democrats walked out. I'm happy to report that all of the Austin Democrats did walk out. There were some South Texas and Houston Democrats that did not walk out, but that's another, we can talk about that in another day. And so you should be proud of your representatives for doing the right thing. Including some former city council members like Cheryl Cole. So that really, in some ways, sums up the session, which was the majority party, the Republicans, tried to ram through a bunch of anti-city, anti-people legislation, and they were successful on many issues. For those folks who care about the right to choose for a woman, there was a SB 8 was a, I know I'm here to talk about environmental issues, and I'll get to that, but I think it's important to give the context. SB 8 was approved and signed by the governor, a bill that makes it easier for anyone over 21 to get a gun without proper training, also passed. Also passing was legislation that makes it hard for public educators to talk about things like racism or the history of racism in our country in the past and in the present. And I can't remember the bill number. It was by Representative Toth and carried by Senator Creighton. I get my bill numbers mixed up all the time. I will say, I just put in the chat, I don't know if people on Facebook can see that as well. I did do a write-up at the end of the legislative session that kind of sums up some things that happened in legislative session. Lone Star chapter of the Sierra Club will also be doing a kind of our legislative scorecard. It should come out probably later this month or in early July, where we'll look at all the issues and look at how our representatives and senators voted in the House and Senate and kind of giving them a score. We do that after every session. So look for those. There's also a lot of information about the legislative session on our website, so look to that. So I'm still getting to the environmental bills, but I wanted to just make clear that whether you care about environmental issues or social justice issues, there were attacks from the majority party on these issues. And so it was a difficult session. But let me start with the other big event that happened this session, which I think all of you who froze in your house as I did were aware of, which was Winter Storm Uri, and a major effort at reform of our electric grid. And I'll give the legislature maybe a C on the efforts around that issue of Winter Storm Uri. And again, Democrats obviously are in the minority. They're in the minority on the key committees that dealt with this issue. They're in the minority in the Senate and the House, which means they don't have a ton of leverage on these issues. So basically what came out was what the majority party thought was the right response. And so there were a number of bills that did pass. The big bills are SB 2, which changed the board membership and process for naming board members of ERCOT. SB 2 was sponsored by Senator Hancock in the Senate and by Representative Chris Patty in the House. We didn't particularly like SB 2. And the reason I say that is the final version that passed could lead to a politicization, if that's a word, of the ERCOT board, in that the current ERCOT board is composed of basically 5 unaffiliated board of directors who are named by all the stakeholders and approved by the Public Utility Commission, and then 10 representatives of different stakeholder groups. So, generators, the transmission companies, commercial and industrial customers, the residential customers are represented by OPUC. They did away with all that and have gone to a 11-member board that will be named by a committee, and that committee will be that 3-member committee that will name the board members is going to be chosen by the governor, the lieutenant governor, and the speaker of the House. So it may be a good idea to have independent board members who aren't subject to stakeholder influence directly. It's pretty concerning that the people naming them are ultimately going to be people picked by the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker. We know the history in Texas of campaign contributions and who gets named. So we're somewhat concerned by that bill. We'll be watching it. But then the other big bill that passed, the wider bill, is SB3, which was the big winter storm Uri response. That bill has a lot of good in it, but also is weak in some areas and also was a real missed opportunity. And the good I'll say in it is they are requiring weatherization. So when I say weatherization, I mean making sure that our power plants can stand both extreme cold and extreme heat. That is going to be required under this bill. The big issue is also, are they going to require that of the natural gas supply? And given the power of Texoga and the Permian Basin, they gave some, I'll call them very weak weatherization standards for the natural gas industry. And by weak, I mean, they're not requiring it of everyone. They're requiring that basically a new committee come together, map our natural gas supply, from the wellhead to the power plant. And again, in whether Sierra Club likes it or not, about 50% of our electricity within ERCOT does come from gas, what some people call natural gas. We call it fracked gas because it's mainly fracked gas. So that it is important to weatherize those units and make sure there's a supply of gas when you need it. But what they did is say, we're going to do a mapping function and then leave it to the Railroad Commission to come up with the rules on what's required. And this is all going to happen over the next several years with lots of input and committee from the gas industry. So it's essentially, if you've ever been at the legislature, the people who really call the shots. I mean, in part, it's obviously the governor and lieutenant governor and speaker, but it's also Texas Chemical Council and Texoga and industrial and Texas Association of Business. They are really the strongest lobbyists in the state and have the most power because of the campaign contributions they do, particularly with the Republican Party, but also with some Democrats. So we got a very weak weatherization standard out of the bill. We did get much better communications. So there will be a communication system for we, the people. And that was good. And we did get a great amendment. This is the one climate change victory, thanks to Donna Howard and the work we did with Donna Howard, is we got a little line in the bill saying that Railroad Commission and PUC have to consult with the Office of the State Climatologist to look forward 15 years at we didn't say climate change, but basically work with them on those rules. So if you want to say, did any climate change legislation pass? A small amendment with a few words passed as part of SB3. So we should thank Donna Howard's work for that, and a lot of us who were behind the scenes pushing that. What is really missing in that bill is the demand side of the equation. So that bill is really about weatherizing the supply side. This legislature did absolutely nothing for people. And so when I say that, I mean, think about the great work City Council has done in terms of ratepayer relief and tenant relief. This legislature did absolutely nothing to look at, do we need to raise our building code standards? Again, City of Austin just adopted new building codes. Do we need to look at building code standards? Do we need to look at raising our utility goals? So these are the big utilities like Encore and Centerpoint for energy efficiency. Do we need to do more on demand response? Do we need to do more on distributed generation like solar and storage? And for the most part, with a few minor exceptions, this legislature, the bills were filed, we had hearings, but they didn't move those forward either as separate bills or as part of SB3. It was a rejection to the idea that we needed to look at the demand side, which to me was stunning. And I'll say that the Democrats, tried. I'm not sure they made it as much of a focus as they should have. But again, we have to keep in mind they were fighting off, lots of other stuff. And so it's hard being a Democrat in the Texas House, or particularly in the Texas Senate, when you're being pulled. You got a lot of defensive work to do. So it's hard to keep your eye on every ball that's in the air. But that to me was a big failure in those Winter Storm Uri bills. The other bills involving Winter Storm Uri were those involved the very complex issue of securitization. And I am not a financial expert, but basically this is the idea that all those debts that utilities and natural gas distribution utilities, so like Texas Gas Service, now have because of Winter Storm Uri, all those extra payments they owe people in ERCOT or owe natural gas suppliers. Those are huge bills from February. Austin Energy actually did, fairly well considering, but there are a lot of utilities, particularly electric co-ops, that are in real trouble because of the huge amounts of money they owe other people within ERCOT or to gas suppliers. So they passed a series of securitization bills. I could tell you the numbers. I'll tell, they're in that blog, but there's one for electric co-ops, there's one for natural gas distribution utilities, there's one for outside of ERCOT, and there's one for ERCOT. At the end of the day, what this means is we're going to be doing basically debt servicing, and then they'll pay back to get the money to pay people, and then the rest of us, i.e. ratepayers, will be paying that back over time, slowly over 10 or 30 years, depending on how they do those financing. And again, they could have included as part of that customer relief or energy efficiency programs or demand response programs. They ignored the consumer. I mean, you could say it's a benefit to the consumer to not have to pay back your bill from Winter Storm Uri all at once. You spread it out. But at the end of the day, those bills are to basically make sure that a bunch of retail electric providers and utilities and electric co-ops don't go bankrupt. So it's really for those utilities. I'm being kind of negative, aren't I? I'm sorry. I'll try to be more positive. I'll say one positive movement, particularly in the Texas House, is we had a number of good water bills that passed the House. One of those good water bills passed the Senate, but that was a little bit of some good work by a lot of organizations, and obviously the Democrats were very involved. So we had one bill that did pass and has gone to the governor, which is HB 2225, which basically involves trying to get more water in our streams, rivers, and estuaries and bays through what's called the Texas Water Trust. The Texas Water Trust is something that was formed a number of years ago and is housed at the Water Development Board. And it's basically a place that if you have a water right, you can dedicate that water to environmental flows. But we've only used it in a few cases. And so what this bill does is gives Parks and Wildlife some authority to help, grease the wheel so we can get more water into the Texas Water Trust. So that was a good bill that passed. We passed a number of good bills out of the House on things like no discharge, pristine rivers, which would have helped a lot of the hill country. That bill did not get a fair hearing in the Senate. Chairman Perry from Lubbock never gave it a hearing after it passed the House. We had another good bill giving Parks and Wildlife the ability to contest wastewater discharge permits, so they can represent us, basically the public, on water issues, water rights, and wastewater discharge permits. That was HB 27. Oh, help me, Craig. 15, 16. The numbers escape me sometimes. Again, it didn't go anywhere in the Senate, but the fact that we got these bills out of the House, I think was great. We had another great bill by Morales Shaw, a New Democrat from Houston, just to put all those permits online from the TCEQ to make sure we, the public, can actually see them and don't have to go up to Building F up there on North I-35 just to see copies of proposed permits. That bill sailed through the House and then didn't get a hearing in the Senate. So Senate is a poor Senator Eckhart. It's a hard place, the Senate of Texas, where you have essentially one person, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick really controlling the agenda and controlling what bills move forward and what don't. So still, it was good to have that water bill passed. I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, SB 14, which is an anti-local control bill, was not the only anti-city bill that was out there. Obviously, there were bills that also passed having to do with the so-called defund the police issue. So both SB 23 and HB 1900 passed. And then on the environmental front, there were 3 bad anti-local city bills, one of which passed. The other 2 we stopped, thanks in large part to slightly south of Austin, Representative Aaron Weiner. She did, as always, a fantastic job doing points of order, delaying bills. She is a real gem to have in the Texas House, along with some of the Austin reps, but she really stands out. So the 3 bills, HB 17 was the bill that said thou shall not discriminate, not against trans kids, but against gas. So thou cities, political subdivisions of cities, shall not do anything that would ban the ability to hook up to energy sources like gas. That bill did pass and has been signed by the governor. What that really means is cities like Austin or Dallas, which have talked about in the future doing full electrification of buildings, really can't under this bill. They can continue to do energy efficiency, electric ready, other things, but it does prevent us from doing things like have been done in Colorado and California, where we try to do, for climate change, full electrification. So that bill did pass. We did get some important conversation on the Texas House floor to make it clear the intent of the bill wasn't to stop cities from doing, good things on clean energy and energy efficiency. It just says what the bill says. You can't directly or indirectly, ban hookups to any energy source. The 2 bills we stopped, there was Craig Nazer will be happy about this. 1261, SB 1261 was the bill that said cities aren't allowed to regulate directly or indirectly greenhouse gases, which would put into question City of Austin's, City of Dallas, City of San Antonio, City of Houston's climate action plans. We first got the word indirectly taken out in the Senate, which was important. And then we ultimately killed the bill in the House due to, again, Zwiener getting it pushed to the end of the calendar through a point of order. So it got delayed, and then they never got to it. So that one ended. The other one was the similar to HB 17. There was a bill, HB 1501, that would have said you can't discriminate against, ban, restrict gas appliances, gas or propane appliances in buildings. And again, this makes it difficult to move to things like efficient water pumps or heat pumps. Water heaters or heat pumps that are electric. So that one was stopped again on a point of order by Aaron Weiner, and we worked with her closely on that. So that was, sometimes your victories are stopping stuff, but those were important ones to stop. I would like to report that the Texas legislature, looking at the vast problems of air pollution from oil and gas and, flaring and methane, took action. They didn't. We had lots of bills filed on methane and flaring, a lot by actually Austin Democrats like Jenna Hinojosa and Goodwin and Senator Eckhart, especially around university lands, because obviously UT gets a lot of our money from oil and gas, but we want it to be as clean as possible. None of those bills got hearings. We had a few hearings on methane regulations, but those bills didn't go anywhere. It's, again, a wasted opportunity. We did get some commitments to do some interim hearings on these issues. And TCQ, which partially regulates air pollution, Railroad Commission does, will be under sunset. So we hope to bring some of those issues back on air pollution. We did in the budget get some additional money for air monitoring by TCQ, both mobile and stationary air monitoring. That will be important given the large number of cities that have problems with particulate matter and ozone and sulfur dioxide. So that was, that was good news. And a lot of the Austin Democrats that are on the Appropriations Committee, like Donna Howard, did help in those areas. We got some important money for CapCog as well for some of their air quality work. So that's an improvement over last session. Another big environmental issues are abandoned and orphaned wells. We had a hearing to raise bonding levels. Bill didn't go anywhere. We did get two good actions on that. One is a bill by Representative Wally out of Houston that was sponsored also by Senator Nichols out of East Texas that will require an interim study on the orphan wells. So an interim committee will be looking at how do we fund that? How do we clean up all those wells? We got thousands and thousands of them in Texas, and they are a pollution problem because of methane leaks. And then we also got in the budget the funding restored for plugging about 1,000 wells a year through the Railroad Commission that was initially taken out. And we also got a study that the Railroad Commission also do their own study on how do they need to increase fees and bonding levels to plug more wells, because we got, again, tens of thousands of wells out there that haven't been plugged. Another bill that was important, unfortunately, the version that we liked didn't pass. Again, thank the Lieutenant Governor for this, was we have a program in Texas called the Texas Emission Reduction Plan, which all of us pay into through sales tax on vehicles and registration fees. And that then leads to rebates for electric vehicles or getting cleaner engines and vehicles, larger vehicles on the road, and some other programs as well. HB 472 by Representative Landgraf out of Odessa did pass, but his version didn't pass. The Senate version passed, and the Senate version does take about a third of that money and give it to congestion mitigation projects for highways, which is not the best use of TERP funds because that's not really cost effective. You know, building more highways isn't really the way to clean up air pollution from vehicles. That being said, the final budget does have a lot more money because we're putting the money into a trust fund outside the budget for TCEQ, Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. So there's going to be these last 2 years, we only had about 77 million for TERP programs. We're going to have about 160 million to do clean programs that could include electric storage or programs to lower emissions from oil and gas or cleaner vehicles. There are a number of programs within that. Clean school buses could be part of that, like the electric buses that, or for transit authorities, you know, electric buses that Austin is doing, that Cap Metro is doing. Some of that money can come from TERP. So we're gonna have more money in the budget for that. So that's despite the bad Senate amendment that takes a third of the money away. It's still a positive gain in terms of the total money. It was just unfortunate. When Winter Storm Uri happened, both the governor and a lot of leading Republicans immediately blamed renewable energy as the cause of Winter Uri. So I'm happy to report that for the most part, anti-renewable legislation did not pass. So the version of Senate B3, the big Winter Uri bill, did have some anti-renewable language in it where renewable energy would have to pay the costs of backup power and ancillary service. That was removed from SB3. Instead, they're doing more of a review. It still could lead to some bad things for renewable energy, but it's not, it'll have to go through a process. So that was good. And then there were various bills that would have basically required renewable energy to pay for transmission costs for their interconnection, which isn't the way we do interconnection within ERCOT. We basically socialize all transmission. And so that didn't pass as well. Those were major victories. So we worked a lot with the renewable energy industry on that. And we were, in the end, we were, victorious on stopping those bills. There were a few, I'll say, minor good bills on renewable energy that did pass. Senate Bill 415 allows for electric storage to be used for reliability and transmission needs. It's a limited bill. It's only the first 100 megawatts of electric storage can be contracted by utilities for reliability purposes. And then there was a good solar bill of rights by Senator Menendez that did pass. I want to say it's Senate Bill 389. Look at my blog because sometimes I get my numbers wrong, as Craig knows. So that, those bills did pass. That's positive. A lot of other bills on clean energy. I already mentioned energy efficiency bills we had, but also other distributed generation bills that we had good hearings on. In the end, the large private transmission companies and traditional generators really killed those bills. They don't want distributed generation to have a seat at the table within ERCOT, honestly, because it will undermine the ability of gas and coal to continue to make money if you have lots of distributed resources on the grid. So they were behind the scenes fighting things like that in energy efficiency bills. There's only a limited, there's lots of kilowatt hours to go around and to sell, but the more things you do through energy efficiency or local solar, that's not good for the bottom line of Vistra or Energy or some of the large private entities. So it's difficult to get these bills passed. See, 1240. Let me mention one other good issue, and I'll say Sierra Club participated, but I have to take off my hat, if I had a hat, to Karen Hayden from the Seed Coalition, who really worked very hard on this. Is the bad radioactive waste bill was stopped. And that was a bill that was sort of I'll say what is it? What's the expression? A Trojan horse, a wolf in sheep clothing, where if you read the bill, and this was by Representative Landgraf out of Odessa, who also represents Andrews County, if you read the bill, you would say, oh, it's got some good things in it because it had language about banning high-level waste coming to Texas. If you don't know this, there's a application by Waste Control Specialist, and it's actually a joint investment with a French company, to bring high-level radioactive waste to Texas. So the bill, which was SB 1046, HB 2692, the bill had some language in it that would ban high-level waste, but actually that's a federal issue, and we really can't. That's up to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So it's kind of a false. It wouldn't have probably led to anything, but it had a lot of bad stuff in it. It had things that took away fees that imported generators. Basically that the WCS has to ultimately pay. Fees and surcharges. It would have led to about an 80% reduction in those, and that money is then used for cleanup and for oversight of low-level radioactive waste. And then it took away a lot of the worker safety and regulatory safety provisions that are needed to assure that the low-level waste that we're getting is actually taken care of. So it was a big victory to have that bill stopped. It was ultimately stopped on a point of order by, of all people, Tom Craddock, who is not usually our friend, but there were a lot of oil interests who also were concerned about this bill. So it was a strange alliance of strange bedfellows. So I take my hat off. Sierra Club was obviously against the bill as well. But Karen Hayden and her partner, Tom Smitty Smith, who's supposedly retired, but he's not really retired, did a whole lot of work on this issue along with a lot of other folks. So we did stop that bill, and I know a lot of Austin folks that are involved with Austin Democrats also participated in those hearings. So hats off to them as well for the work they did there. So when you get victories in the Texas legislature, you got to celebrate them. So we should celebrate that one. So I think with that, maybe we can open it up to questions, Tim or Craig. I'm not sure.
Yeah, that works. I think someone had asked about the plan to discuss HB 1480, the agricultural gag bill.
Yeah, so that one did, as I remember, that one did pass, but we worked with farm and ranching folks to take out the sort of the worst of the provisions. So the version that passed, I won't say it's good, but it took out the kind of the gag provisions in the bill. So that was, again, thanks to, I didn't play a big part in that. That was mainly Judith, geez, I'm drawing a blank on her name, with the farm and Ranch Freedom Alliance, did a lot of work on that. And she got basically Senator Colcourse to take it out of, once it came over the Senate, it was taken out.
Okay,
what
we also
about
have
EV
a question
bills?
about electric EV bills?
Yeah, unfortunately, I forgot to mention that. Well, so here's the fortunate thing. None of the bills that would have imposed a large registration fee on EV owners passed. And those were killed basically on points of order. That was SB, I want to say 1728, and there was an HB, and I can't remember. None of those passed. But also not passing was, again, Smitty working with TechCetra had a major bill by Representative Canales. That bill got stuck in calendars. I think it got stuck in calendars because there were interested parties, i.e. oil and gas, who don't really want to see a big electric vehicle policy in Texas. So that did not pass. That bill actually did have a registration fee for EV owners, but it was $100 as opposed to $200 or $250, which were the other bills. But yeah, that did not pass. The only EV legislation that passed that's kind of minor is one SB 1202 by Senator Hancock that just says EV charging stations, EV charging companies are not retail electric providers. That's important because we don't want to make it hard for EV charging companies to have to register with PUC as retail electric providers. So that's, it's minor, but it was an important change. But yeah, none of the big EV policies changed. Within TERP, the Texas Emission Reduction Plan, the same language that is in there now continues, which is, I think it's 1,000 vehicles a year of rebates are in the budget, but the major reforms we wanted to do to really expand those programs did not happen. Again, it was in the House version of 4472, but not in the Senate version. And that the Senate version is the version that passed.
Pat, I see your hand up for a second.
Yes, you did. And I'm back. I had wanted to ask on the ag-gag bill if it was only Senator Colcourse that helped slightly amend that to slightly improve it, or were there any other senators that helped with that?
Yeah, again, I was not involved in that bill. If you'd like, I can find out from Judith. I'm pretty sure that went to the Water Committee, which Senator Eckhart is on. So I imagine she was, behind the scenes helping with that as well. But yeah, the version that eventually passed was better because of action in the Senate.
Right.
The House.
And Representative Cyrier, who is, very close to Austin because he's in Bastrop, was the House sponsor, and he's also the chair of Sunset. So I'm guessing that's what prevented anybody on the House side doing anything with that.
Yeah, it's when you have a chairman with a bill, members tend not to mess with it. It's just the way it works. So he did make it less bad in the committee sub, as I remember, but he didn't go all the way. But it was changed by Senator Colcourse. But I know that Judith and there were some other folks that were very involved in that. I just wasn't personally.
Okay,
Roy,
thanks.
Roy, I see you have a question. So, and I think that'll probably be our last.
Thanks a lot, not just for being here today, but going sleepless for so many months in a row. And what happened and what can happen with the pristine streams bill. It made it out of the House, but I understand it never got a hearing in the Senate. It just dealt with discharge of not degrading streams beyond the point where they are now. What can we do? What happened and what can we do in the future to get that through?
Well, I think we do have to take the good news that for the first time, I think ever, we got that bill out of the House, and we should thank Representative King of Uvalde, Tracy King, who's a conservative Democrat. You know, he's not always aligned with us on our issues, but actually he carried a lot of great bills this session and was able to get them out of the House. So that's kind of good news. At the end of the day, you know, Senator Perry is a difficult cat. He's from Lubbock. He is, you know, I would not call him a pro-environment person. He is accessible. You can talk to him. But, you know, I think we're going to have to do some work over the interim. There were a lot of bills that passed out of the House that went to his committee. I mean, there was a big, I didn't even mention these bills by Aaron Zwiener, HB 2275 that would have created grants for resiliency, for public entities resiliency, things like, you know, making sure nursing homes have backup power, but also demand response and other things. That never got a hearing. I think it was because it involved water as well. It went to his committee. HB 2000, which was a big loan program using basically state-backed loans for backup and demand response and efficiency by Huberty, never got a hearing in Charles Perry's committee. So a lot of good bills got stopped in his committee. So I don't know what to tell you, Roy. I think we try to make it an interim issue, bring it back again. Look for, as we always have to, look for unlikely allies, i.e. rich Republican donors, landowners that have some sway with lieutenant governor or chairman. That's a lot of times when things go to the Senate, that's what we have to do. We have to find unlikely allies who play in those circles that we don't play in. Also mention, there will be special sessions. We're going to have a big redistricting special session. We've already been told we're going to have a special session on federal funding, all the federal funding they did not put in SB1. They put some of it, but there's a lot they didn't put in there. And we know that there's probably going to be some sort of infrastructure plan from Biden if they can negotiate something with the senators. So that will be taken up probably in October, special session, but we've also been told there's going to be a special session probably before on some, SB 7. I would expect SB 14, maybe customer relief from Winter Storm Uri. I'm not sure. So there's, I don't know if issues like pristine waters can be brought up in a special session, but who knows? We can at least talk about it. There'll be opportunities to talk about things. So I would say interim, there'll be interim hearings. TCQ is under sunset. So both the PUC and TCQ will be under sunset this year, which means there'll be a process starting later this year to bring a lot of these issues that we care about to the forefront. So I would say that's the other avenue.
If I may, on the methane, I understand that the federal government.
Oh, we were running on time, so keep it really fast.
What about what the feds are doing on the methane?
Yeah, I can separately send a note to Tim and Craig. There's actually some hearings coming up in mid-June. I was about to say mid-January, mid-June, with the EPA to start to get input on the feds taking further action on that. That's our best. Honestly, we're not going to get methane regulations out of this Texas House and Senate. It's important to bring up the issue. We're going to have to rely on Biden and the EPA to do that.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Cyrus. That was a really good summary. And we'll post this online for folks. If anyone has any questions, I'm sure they can get in touch with you. And as you said, there's a scorecard that'll be coming out. So next, we have Councilmember Ellis. She wanted to talk for a few minutes about a few things that are going on at City Hall. Hopefully more positive than things going on at the Ledge. It's always more cheerful with City Council, or usually I should say, not always. But with that, I'll give it to the council member.
We try, thank you. And I wanted to come by and say hello and give you an environmental progress report, if you will. As you know, our city council is much more friendly to environmental protection than the state of Texas. And I do appreciate getting an update from Cyrus, because I know everyone that's been working and following the Ledge is exhausted. And so I know you're probably ready for a long nap and some time off if you ever take it. But I did want to come by and just give you an update on some of the things that I've been working on. This is by no means an exhaustive list of what other colleagues have been working on. So we all kind of have our own wheelhouse and our own pet projects that we work on together. But I was the lead sponsor of the 2020 Safety and Mobility Bond, the $460 million bond that passed overwhelmingly. It included things like urban trails, bike lanes, safe routes to school, sidewalk improvements, capital improvement projects like bridges. The Longhorn Dam Wishbone Bridge will be part of this. And so the Transportation Department is staffing up. They haven't unveiled their exact programmatic list yet of what's going to happen in what order, but I'm very excited to be working on that with them. I am the chair of the mobility committee, so I'm in a perfect position to be stewarding this bond through its implementation process, which is very exciting. And in May, it's June now, sometimes I have a hard time keeping track. Our May mobility committee meeting was all focused on Bike Month. And so if you want to go back and watch that meeting, it had 6 or 7 topics of things like Cap Metro's B-Cycle program, electric bike through Austin Energy. We talked a little bit about the future of healthy streets, which was another initiative that I led on. And started about a year ago during the pandemic, but essentially created safer spaces and streets for folks to walk and roll and bike and stroll, and for kids to learn how to ride their bike, and for neighbors to meet and be able to safely social distance. So that we are working on what are the next steps of that program. I also led on a resolution about multifamily composting. So the city is in its last phases of rolling out the composting program to single family homes, but they are piloting multifamily and condo development so that we can get a good program in place for folks who don't necessarily live in a single family home and still want to compost, like myself. We built the Clean Creeks Crew, which is a program that is a partnership between watershed protection and resource recovery. It's funded through the Clean Community Fee, and they are doing a comprehensive study of the entire city and where litter happens and how it gets into our creeks. And so the idea is to use staffing either through the recovery department or groups like the Other Ones Foundation, which does litter abatement in parks. And so that's a really exciting program to figure out how is litter getting into our creeks and how can we stop that from happening, or where do we need to target picking up to make sure that we don't have bad things in our creeks polluting our environment. We also created an urban trails stakeholder group. I had a good conversation with George Kofer a long time ago, and he said, hey, we're having some problems getting urban trails and other pathway projects through the permitting process. So we created this group that was a combination of permitting and active transportation staff members and other community stakeholders to look at how can we create ADA accessibility ramps, wayfinding signs, and generally be able to build accessible trails through our community without trying to treat them like they are a building. And so that's been a really interesting group to follow. I'm also on the CapCog Clean Air Coalition. So the city is stepping up its partnership with CapCog to tackle issues like PM 2.5. So that's a particulate matter, PM, and it has to do a lot with sedimentation. There's issues around quarries, concrete batch plants, other sorts of pollution that are fine, but do need to be addressed and need to be air to make sure that the air people are breathing is clean and free of that dust. Very exciting update from yesterday's council meeting. We just created a partnership with the Nature Conservancy. We now have a conservation easement with them. This is about protecting that are west on Southwest Parkway, just past Travis Country. And the Nature Conservancy has been doing a fantastic job of managing those lands for decades. And they just needed a little bit of help with the city because a lot of nonprofits have fallen on hard times and want to make sure they can still maintain the land. So we developed a conservation easement. We are helping finance their management. So they have a steward that is out there full time, and we are ensuring that they can continue that good work. So that was a really exciting update. We've also purchased a lot of water quality protection lands from the 2018 bonds that were passed by voters. I don't have the exact number, but it is lots and lots and lots and lots of acres. So that's something that's really exciting adjacent to District 8 because that's where the most need is for water quality protection lands. And I do want to give a shout out to Amy Everhart, who is my chief of staff now. She's been on for a couple of months and has been a great asset to the team. And we're so glad to have her back in City Hall. And there's probably a few things that I left off, but I didn't want to take too much time because I came in last minute and just wanted a few minutes to say hello and to tell you about what I'm working on.
You forgot to say that you guys passed the 21 building codes, which is a big environmental benefit for more efficient buildings.
We did. And there were some things that Paul Robbins, as many of you may know him, kind of brought forward and said there were still some things he wanted to look at. And I'm thankful my colleague Leslie Poole said, I want to work on this with you. And so we are staying apprised. We're trying to look at everything we can do. There's so much more we want to do as a city with building codes and building materials. And it is so frustrating when lead says you can't do that.
Yeah, I spoke as well. And so, yeah, I know, yeah, they're going to work on EV ready and electric ready and water resistance heating and other stuff that wasn't included in the codes.
Right, which is so exciting. And I'm glad that you're going to be a part of that conversation because your voice is needed.
Well, thank you for the update. It's nice to hear positive things after hearing a mixed bag from the state. So did anyone have any announcements before we wrap up? I didn't see anything in chat. Okay, well, with that, it's 1 o'clock. So if anyone wants to stay on and socialize, like I said, at breakup rooms, but I know also people have things they have to get back to. So I will end the official part of the meeting, but as I can set up breakout rooms and if people want to socialize afterwards, we can do that too. So thank you everyone for coming.
This again.
Thank you, Timothy.
Thank you.
And let's thank Councilmember Ellis for being here.